It's a Thursday, so we don't do our normal introduction. We just do an introduction that starts like this, I guess.
It's pretty good.
I'm going in cold, but you're coming in hot. We have a very special guest with us today, solicitor Andrew Carpenter. Now, that is a very boring way to introduce you when...
It's still a fun one.
But still, it's still fun. Look, it's true. It is true. But you have been titled and headlined as...
Not by us.
Not by us.
Not by me either.
The most hated man in Australia by pedophiles. Welcome, Andrew Carpenter.
Thank you. But besides Dad, I think it's the best nickname anyone could ever have. So
yes,
Dad
I
slash
do agree.
the most hated man by pedophiles.
Yeah,
Can you
true.
explain why you are the most hated man by pedophiles?
And it is important we say that all in one go, because
Yeah.
if you say the most hated man and then pause for a
Yeah.
while, we might stitch you up and use that as an isolated
Yeah.
graph.
And it's not a
And you
radio
won't
show.
know.
No one's tuning in just to hear that.
it's
You
either a
won't know
podcast.
how we edit
It's
it.
either a podcast or a Daily Mail
Yeah.
episode when that happens. So
Well, George is here, so it's probably Daily Mail.
How dare you? Actually, it would be quite nice if they listened. They clearly don't, because there's shit I've said on here that they would definitely write about if they knew.
So yeah, why do they call you that? That's a good place to start.
basically, for 15 years, I've been suing and bankrupting child sex offenders, and I discovered a loophole.
For your job, not
For-
just
for your job,
on the
yes.
side.
Not
You're not a
just-
vigilante with a mask on.
No, not at all.
Or are you?
Oh, spandex looks good to me. But anyway, no, I found some loopholes a lot of offenders are doing, and I always caveat anything I talk about. I never go into detail for
Yep.
listeners. I just talk about stats and prevention. But
Yeah.
I found loopholes they use to actually hide assets, and people don't realise that the taxpayer is indemnifying these idiots for their crimes, and no one realises that. There was a study in 2016 of the actual cost of the Australian taxpayer back then
Yeah.
is about $36 billion a year. And
36 billion.
36 billion. It's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys will be offended against. And if you think people that are offended against, they generally can't work, will never work, can't finish school, weekly psychotherapy, psychologist, GP, medication, the cost
Yeah.
is massive. And I realised there was a loophole, and the hard thing is with these matters, the conviction rate is 0.003%. So I thought, what's another way I can actually try to start a law change to deter this? We hear all great law changes of things after the fact. But I mean, the reason I wasn't doing 150 k's an hour on the way to work in the morning is I don't want the financial penalty. ASIC, for instance, stopped convicting people because they realise that people don't care about suspended sentences; they care about monetary gain. So
Wow.
I thought, why don't I really hit them where it hurts?
Yeah.
And yeah, I've got a lot of people that I've bankrupted. I've got a lot of people that I've sued. But my big thing about this is just prevention. And
Yeah.
people don't like the fact that I'm hitting them where it hurts. And I just love the title for that. I'm using my platform to speak about it, raise awareness. And I mean, if the only people that hate me are those people, then so be it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
take us back. How long have you worked in law, and when did you kind of move into this, I suppose, niche area of, really kind of fighting against, predators and sex abuse criminals, but from the point of view of a solicitor rather than the criminal,
Why
prosecution?
I was never abused as a child. It's never happened to me, which people think it's weird that I'm so passionate about it. But my first day at a law firm, it's when you're the fresh meat in there, they basically throw all the files that no one else wants to take over. And I think I was 23, 24 at the time, and I was the only one in the office that didn't have kids. And they said, just take these and deal with them. And I realised that these people, they've had their agency stripped, they've had their life taken from them. There was, effectively they were dealt a life sentence.
Yeah.
And no one was giving these files time of day. And I thought, this is a person. This is someone whose life has been stripped out. And you think happy memories that we have of our childhood, many of them can't remember anything positive. They don't remember Christmases, birthdays. Their childhood is surrounded by what's happened. And I thought, do you know what? If I could be a way of actually trying to be the beacon of light to help these people and be the voice of the voiceless, why wouldn't I? And I just wanted to make sure I was doing the right thing. And if I could, now having children of mine, if I could actually stop this from happening, why wouldn't I? So I started files like that, and then I started seeing how offenders would, before they would get sued, they'd pump money to superannuation, which is a protected asset, which you can't touch. And then I heard about some of the more prevalent offenders did the same thing. And I thought, hang on, why is no one fighting for this? There was there was a
That
magistrate.
was a known thing, was it? That they were putting money straight into
Yeah,
superannuation?
and
Wow.
and
Just
so-
that they could, I
They
suppose.
could,
And if
right.
they did, you couldn't really argue that or touch it.
Well,
so.
you look at Barry Cable, the Victorian footballer. The night before his civil trial, he declared bankruptcy, which means that debt's extinguished. He
Give us
doesn't
a
have
bit of
anything.
background on that story for our listeners who don't know.
Yeah, so Barry Cable was an AFL footballer. He wasn't criminally charged, but he was alleged to have committed many instances of abuse by many females, and so they all joined together and sued him. The night before his trial, he declared bankruptcy, and so they'll never see a cent of that. Where, say, for instance, if he was a fraudster and he hid money and was bankrupt, well, guess what? Debts in fraud are never extinguished at bankruptcy. So you can have another crack later on. And so there was a magistrate in Adelaide by the name of Peter Liddy. He was convicted in 2001, longest serving magistrate in, I think, Australian history at the time.
Wow.
And he was a full-time government employee before 1985, which means that if you work more than 20 years as a government employee before 1984, or start before 1985, you retire on 80% of your wage. So when he went to jail in 2001, he sold all of his assets. He sold his unencumbered mansion in the Barossa Valley, which is a wine region.
Yeah.
He sold all his collectibles, and he's been sitting in prison for 24 years, effectively earning 80% of a magistrate's wage. The dozens of children he abused can't touch him.
There's no caveat in that law to say that if there's a criminal offence
If you're found
involved,
guilty of
you
it.
don't
No.
get that?
The Bankruptcy Act has been there for years, where people know that, well, they can't touch me. I've had an offender that was actually from Victoria that abused a child in Adelaide, and he got found guilty of that, which is one of the rare ones where they actually found guilty of. And he was actually bragging during a settlement conference that I've got millions in super. I'll rather get rid of my $1 million house in South Australia on the beach than give that girl a cent for ruining my life. And he was going to take it all the way. He's like, I'll just get rid of my house and live off my millions in super.
Oh, that's disgusting.
And there is no way. And I thought years ago it would be an absolute no-brainer to start this, where it's like, hey, the conviction rates are appalling. Want to do something to deter. And if you've got millions of dollars in super, why should it be the taxpayers meet the costs and you go ahead? And it's just the conviction rate. Most of the people I've represented and won have never been to the police, have never secured a criminal conviction, because the stats are against them. I did a talk at Lawn last year with Grace Tame, and people thought it was well rehearsed, but we literally just freeballed the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the night before, I was trying to think, what's something I could look at to show a stat of how unlikely it is to be convicted with this. And I don't know about you, but to me, the most trusted news source in Australia is Sportsbet. So I went on Sportsbet and I looked at odds. So
We're both quite confused at the moment.
A little bit of silence. I was like, hang on, because I'd already prepared my response to go, actually, it's Gold FM News Melbourne, because that's what I work for. I was like,
already-
oh,
I was
wait,
gonna say
that's not
Daily
what.
Mail.
Now I'm really, really thrown.
And so I looked at the closest stats. So statistically, 3 out of 1,000 child sex offenders will be convicted.
Oh, my God.
And I looked at, so that's 1 out of, well, so it's 0.003%. So you've got a 99.997% chance of getting away with this. According to Sportsbet, the closest odds I found to that were Bob Katter and Pauline Hanson becoming the next Prime Minister of Australia. When I said that in the room, that your money would be safer betting on one of them becoming Prime Minister,
oh, my God.
the room dropped.
Wow.
That's how remote it is. And that's why I've started trying to say, let's go after them civilly, because if people are going to think about offending, if they realise they're going to lose everything, they might stop and think twice.
So this is what I find interesting and would like to talk to you about. I think that, generally and very much, people removed from the world of law and criminality, if you're talking and thinking about sexual abuse, whether that's, adults or children, very much thinking of it in a criminal way. So thinking about someone going to court, someone facing charges, criminal charges, but you're dealing on the civil side of it. So where you work and kind of where you stand is representing people who have been affected by a crime or an alleged crime, and the perpetrator or alleged perpetrator doesn't need to be convicted or found guilty. It's about the damages it's caused to the person outside of the criminality of the act. Is that right?
The best example is O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson got found not guilty of murdering his ex-wife and Ron Goldman, I think his name was.
Ron Goldman.
Spoiler alert, we haven't done that episode yet, but that's okay.
But then when he was sued, the court, so guilty verdict is beyond reasonable doubt. So the reasonable doubt in the O.J. Simpson matter was a police officer that gave the glove, and a police officer gave an inconsistent statement where at the start he said he wasn't racist, and then there was a video leak later on that he made all racial comments. So the jury could not prove beyond reasonable doubt that he did it because there was that doubt because of what the officer said and did. But in the civil side, the court found that he was highly likely in the balance of probabilities to have committed the murder. And so when people lose all hope, or for instance, the average time frame under the Royal Commission it takes to report a crime of child sex abuse is 29.4 years.
What?
So
that's the average time.
Average time.
So imagine how much higher.
Yeah.
So September 3rd, 1996. You would have been, 3 years old? Sam.
Yeah. Hang on. Why do you look at me and go, oh no, she's way older than that?
But no one knows on exact date at that time unless it's a birthday or Christmas Day.
Sure.
And so when police are probing victim survivors, they're saying, right, well, you were abused 30 years ago. What were you wearing that day? I don't know. What did you do? What happened? But on the civil side of things, it's right, well, it was, you abused either summer or January, February. Okay, so can you remember, were you wearing your school uniform? Yes, you were. Okay, so if it was a school day, you must have wearing a school uniform. They don't need to be precise, and a lot of victim survivors that time or that long after the fact can't remember specific details. But if they can, I had one survivor. He could explain the brand name of a cupboard in his room.
Wow.
And they still couldn't do enough to convict, even though this offender's gone on to abuse many children. And so there's other ways out there, and especially with the stats being that low of conviction, my thing is telling people, look, if this happened to you, there are so many other avenues. Don't get dissuaded. Don't get fearful. You see the Bruce Lerman and Brittany Higgins trial. People aren't saying that this is the Bruce Lerman trial. They're saying it's the Brittany Higgins trial. Yep. So things in the media like that come forward, it gets a lot of victim survivors to take a step back because they see how they're treated in court. But in civil matters, the offenders, they don't have the right to silence. They will be subject to cross-examination. They have to put their story forward, and a judge will make findings if they believe the victim survivor over the offender. So it's a greater balanced way of getting justice, because look at criminal convictions, what they do. If a person's in their 50s that's never worked in their life, a criminal conviction is going to do what? It's not going to change their life at all. But if this person is sitting on millions of dollars and they've managed to work and have a successful career at the detriment of these victim survivors, why should they get to reap the rewards of what they've done?
And then it gives the victim survivors a sense of justice. If that might not be criminally, if they're not found, criminally guilty of something, but it's giving them the belief and the justification for them to say someone is listening to me and someone believes me.
Exactly. And my main thing is deterrence. When you start seeing judgments of people losing all their assets, look when you're younger, for instance, if one of your friends drink drives and lose their license, they can't drive for a year, people think, God, I would never do that.
Yeah.
But there's no real deterrence right now. Like if you're a gambling man, if you saw the odds of 99.997% likely you get away with something, what's the chances that most of these sickos would say, well, let's just do it?
Yeah. When you take on a case, so and now you speak quite publicly about raising awareness and being such an advocate for these people. When you started doing that, when you started speaking publicly about it, were you worried about doing that at first? Have you kind of noticed a big change in kind of your life and how your family kind of feel about all of that?
So when I'm on TV, my wife doesn't want to watch it. And her thing is, I've got young children. I do not want to watch a story about this. And I'm like, this is why it's such a hard topic. People with children need to listen to what I'm doing. Like me, if I see a movie and there's a dog getting hurt, I turn the channel off. I don't want to see it. But as a parent now, it's something that, I do weekly videos every week where I detail the stats of percentages of people in the district court every week charged with child sexual abuse. And I did that about a year and a half ago. I've done it every week since then. And the first week I did it, I realised that in South Australia, we average 25% a day of all people in the district court being related to child sexual abuse.
Oh, gosh.
And I started going, right, it's time to have uncomfortable conversations about this. And you think, this is a crime podcast. You can talk about crime scenes, blood splatters, all that. People don't bat an eyelid. But the second you talk about child sexual abuse, people say, I want to turn off. I don't want to hear it. And my thing from day one is I want to have uncomfortable conversation with the people. 20 years ago, we didn't speak about mental health. 15 years ago, no one spoke about suicide. 5 years ago, no one spoke about domestic violence. Hell, even last year, no one spoke about domestic violence.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about things is when people start going, wow, this is a problem. You think if 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys was overdosing on meth, how quickly would the government do to change something here? But the Australian maltreatment study in 2023, it's 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys. So if you look at an average 30-student classroom, 5 girls and 3 boys will statistically be most likely to be sexually abused before their 18th birthday.
Oh God, it's just terrifying. When we've said many times on the podcast before, when we've been talking about any crimes involving children, we very much say, as non-parents, we cannot fathom anything like that happening to a child. Genuinely can't imagine that extra level of feeling for a parent as well. And I see both sides of the coin of what you're saying, Andrew, in that, as a parent, you don't want to hear these things because how absolutely terrifying. But, of course, having the information and being aware of those things is so important as well. Is there a particular case, I don't know if that's the right word, and correct me if it's not, is it a case or someone you've worked with or someone you've heard about that, whether that's been directly in your career or you've just heard about, has really kind of impacted or affected or stuck with you the most?
I mean, they all, especially having young children of my own, they all get to me. But one recently really got to the core where there was a guy in New South Wales that he's abused all 3 of his children, and he pled guilty to it. And so one of the children, almost 30 years after the fact, wanted to sue him for it. And so wrote him a letter, basically said, you've pled guilty to this. And I get a phone call from his wife, and she said, my husband's done nothing wrong. I said, look, with respect, he pled guilty. Oh, he had to plead guilty because lawyers were expensive. I said, look, no, you plead guilty for a driving fine or a parking ticket, not like that. And I said, look, unfortunate thing is, your husband and you have a freehold house, your daughter has nothing. So you've pled guilty, liability is not an issue. We're going to court. It's about quantum only. This is the kind of thing. It's the level of disconnect is just outstanding sometimes, where people always try to justify it. Like, it's not, child abuse is not a spur of the moment thing like shoplifting or I always say that it's the only crime that has no legal justification. With murder, for instance, self-defense of another, excessive self-defense, drink driving. I cut my finger and I had to drive to the hospital. I had a few beers, but there's
not one possible defense.
There's not.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of Ruby Franke. There's a new documentary out about Ruby Franke, which I'm sure you've heard about, the social media star who, the story is awful. I'm going to do it at some point. But watching that, and then I think sometimes with the culture, like, you're watching a documentary about this and it really goes into the detail of what happened to the kids, and it's just awful. And then, I was telling you before we started recording, on TikTok, I was watching, just scrolling, and there are these people now that kind of, they go up to people that they believe are predators, and they confront them and they talk to them on camera.
Just random people on the street.
Well, no, not random people in the street, but people that they have kind of...
No, but the random people on the street are going up to someone.
Are going up to them.
So just a random TikTok user.
Yeah, and it's not like a detective. It's not someone with, expertise in dealing with a situation and handling a situation like that. It's someone literally walking up to someone and they've kind of lured them there. And, of course, what they've done is abhorrent and everything. But what do you think about kind of people that are kind of being these kind of like detectives of their own, and these gotcha moments that are for kind of TikTok? They're not for...
I mean, a lot of them are doing it for clout. If they were doing it for actual change, they would get the video and take it straight to the police.
Yeah,
it's like, to me, it's like when you see those people that they go to McDonald's and they buy $100 worth of hamburgers, give it to the homeless people, and they're recording it the whole time.
Yep.
But things like that is the reason why the National Sex Offender Registry hasn't passed, because the government is that worried about vigilante behaviour. And there's online AI apps, for instance, that they still are not closing the gaps of of creating images of children. So the law hasn't caught up with technology yet, but I mean, my platform has always been awareness, and I always tell people, if you've got a child that has Snapchat, offenders could actually pinpoint your child right now in real time within half a meter of where they're sitting, and it tells them what their current battery percentage is. Parents
I'm such an old fuddy-duddy in many ways, and one of them is...
Well, just saying that, I think, makes you a fuddy-duddy.
No,
if you use the
that's
term
actually really-
fuddy-duddy.
That's
That's like saying back in my day.
We're all
which I did
fuddy-duddy.
say off
I called,
mic before. I, did
I called
say.
someone in the audience the other night. I called them a giggle pot. I was like,
Oh, yeah,
God, I've
giggle
aged
pot's
myself, haven't I?
Yeah,
Calling
giggle
someone a
pot's
giggle,
good.
your little giggle pot up there.
Oh my giddy aunt!
Oh my
you said
giddy aunt,
that.
yeah.
But I'm a real old fuddy-duddy when it comes to technology and social media, and I just really don't think any of us need it. And something that terrifies me about the prospect of potentially having children one day is bringing them up in an age with social media. Now, that said, I don't have a child now, so by the time a potential child of mine would be at a social media using age, who the hell knows what that would look like then? That terrifies me, and that genuinely is something that I look at as maybe I don't want children. I don't want to bring them up in that, because I look at my childhood before that and all the scary things that were out there, and now this is so much scarier and uncontrollable. I don't even really know the question I want from all of that, but how we talk about the government not catching up with technology. I don't think society's catching up with technology.
No. What was the thing, was it last year when, I don't know, there was going to be a mandate where I think below the age of 16 you couldn't any...
That's in South Australia.
That's in South
social
Australia.
Media. And I think they're trying to do
The
that with YouTube now as well. You have to...
Yeah, really.
But then the hard thing is a lot of conspiracy theorists are saying, that's one step closer to a digital ID. And it's like...
I think completely not conspiracy theories at all. The problem with the mandate, so Australian federal government is banning social media accounts for any users under 16. The thing is, first of all, YouTube, you don't need an account to log in. You can watch anything without logging in.
Okay,
Second
big dog,
thing
you've done that
is-
before.
Yeah, I've done it before.
You've done it
I can't be
before,
bothered entering my password. It's like 18 characters. But with the other social media, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, all of them, you do not have to provide legal identification.
No.
So you can be a 14-year-old and sign up and just put your birthday as a different date.
Yeah.
That anyone can do that. And I've had such a strong opinion on the fact that I think social media accounts should have to be verified by identification.
If
I've thought that from just as someone who has been, relentlessly trolled and saying people only troll on fake accounts, hold everyone accountable. When we're talking about grooming children and child safety on the internet, I cannot understand how that is not a thing that is being looked into.
I mean, bring back 9MSN, or is it MSN Messenger
MSN
for
Messenger,
people under
yeah.
16? Like,
What was your MSN name? Do you remember?
I think it was Bocephus, something weird like that.
Bocephus?
Yeah, it was. There was.
That is
I think it was a
weird.
Jerry Springer episode where this guy came up. My name's Bocephus, and my
good.
dog's name's Skidboot.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Like,
You know
that
what?
really-
I'm actually really ashamed of both of us, Sammy,
So, like,
for not getting that.
Yeah, I know.
reference.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry.
Hey, well,
I'm
look,
so
look when we
sorry.
grew up. It was lunchtime was Jerry Springer and was it
Dr.
Ready Steady
Phil
Coot, and now
Oprah and
kids home sick. I'll go on internet. I'll play video games, and a lot of it comes through. Like,
Somehow more terrifying than Jerry Springer.
yeah.
I don't know. I saw it at Jerry Springer episode. It was I'm my own grandpa, and that I had to do a map to try and detail how it came
How
to
would that
but-
work? Yeah.
Wait.
But you look at there's a game called Roblox where the chat of that it's a children's game, and that is an uncensored chat room where a lot of these offenders actually talk about, hey, add me on Snapchat so we can talk about this game. And that's when they start grooming, and they get kids to send photos, and they AI and they blackmail the children and say, send more photos, otherwise, I know where you live, and things like that. And people aren't getting knowledge around that, and say all the things that I try to do is say, look, for instance, I start my weekly videos, I do the stats. I always say, if you're a parent, grandparent, auntie and uncle, this is something you need to look into. And when I started doing those videos, people go, wow, we had no idea how bad it was. And that's why in 2020, I started a campaign called Super for Survivors, where we're actually trying to say we should actually be able to access the superannuation of child sex offenders, convicted or not, to actually compensate victim survivors. Because the loophole was closed, and it's going to make people think twice about offending.
When I kind of think growing up, when I think of a sex offender, I remember what we kind of had in our where I grew up on Phillip Island, and we had this, like a safe house and the things.
Yeah,
and
neighbourhood watch.
Neighbourhood
the yellow signs.
Yeah, the yellow signs. And you didn't really know a whole lot about it. The only thing that I really knew about it was that once you were like a registered sex offender, if you moved into a new neighbourhood, you would have to kind of announce to the neighbours. Is that a true
Never
thing?
happened in Australia. No, that's
Really?
No.
That's so interesting that there's all these myths around what is true and what isn't. So that's never been a thing in Australia.
I think Western Australia has the closest thing it comes to a sex offender registry, but I think that says about, that you can't live within a certain period of or distance between school.
Right.
In America, there's a system where you put in your address and will say you live next to 7 child sex offenders. I think I think it was a Jackass prank. It was a guy that knocked on the door dressed as a clown and said, actually, I'm a registered offender. But you thinking back to our childhood, everyone knew before internet. So everyone knew before internet that Michael Jackson was a creep. I remember when I was maybe 10 years old, I heard a rumor that Marilyn Manson had a rib removed to do certain things.
Yes,
and you think everyone's probably heard that, and that was before the internet.
That was before memes could be shared. And
I remember, I've used this in an interview a few times. I remember because I was homesick this day, it was the 2001 MTV Video Music or Movie Awards. And I
if
remember
you're going to talk about Janet Jackson's boob, we talk about that.
That was the
weekly,
Super Bowl.
So you can
I'm a diehard NFL fan, so
trust me, I
Big
know.
Super Bowl guy.
but I remember Chris Rock did the opening monologue, and I remember specifically he said that I see R. Kelly's here in front row, which means the Olsen twins have to be at the back of the building. And that was 2001.
Wow.
This was before effectively the internet, and Hollywood stars making jokes like that. There was I think Courtney Love. There was, I think, around 2002, 2003. One of your cousins, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Hey, apparently I'm related to Sabrina Carpenter somehow. But there was something she said 2003, 2004 made a joke about someone being forced to go on Harvey Weinstein's couch, and everyone laughed. And people knew about these things for years, and it was only coming to light now. And a lot of, say what happened with the Queensland child abuse scandal of the childcare centres up like that. Ashley Martin, who's in prison for 36 years now, the childcare centre was actually warned about him 8 years before it happened. And my thing has always been, like, if you have a conversation like this, things happen. If you hear about this, talk to your children, talk about, good touching, bad touching, patting on the head's fine. But, this isn't a thing about teaching 5-year-old sex ed. This is talking about body autonomy, Make sure your children know what's talking about. And even things that, big red lights that I always hear where I interview parents before, when it matters going to court, I interview their children who generally have never told their parents. And the second the parents hear about this, it's like a red light goes off. They go, we remember it was this weekend in term 3 where you changed overnight. You completely changed. We knew something was happening to you. But back then, if they told, look, this is not your fault. If anyone touches you, you won't get arrested. You won't go to prison. And it's about having people actually come out and say, hey, this happens. We know it happens, but how can we actually prevent it? And one big thing is where someone's abused by a family member. Uncle Fred's their favourite uncle in the world. And then one day, I don't want to go to Uncle Jack's. Don't want to go to Uncle Fred's. Don't want to go there. When parents, no, go sit in his lap, give him a kiss, say hello, sleep at his house. Where, listen to your children, because the amount of children that basically give signs, I don't want to go there, don't want to do this, and there's so many warning signs. I think I said to someone a while ago, there's 3 things in life that are capable of telling how it is: drunk people, children, and yoga pants. They're the only 3 things that cannot hide it. Like if a child, my son, why does that guy have a big nose? Why is that person, got that big scar on it? Like,
they haven't been taught what's socially acceptable.
There's
they
no
just say
tact.
what they think.
And if they're just like, if Uncle Fred's their favourite person in the world, and right away, I hate him, I don't want to go there, never want to see him again, instead of, don't be silly, it's why? Why would you do that? Why would you don't want to go there? Did something happen? And what offenders do is they tell children, now, if you tell anyone, you'll go to jail, I'll go to jail. I won't buy you lollies anymore. And my big thing is always talk about, how can parents actually find ways to know what's going on,
It's making parents talk to children about it, but it's also very importantly making, legislative changes and really changing things. And you said earlier, legislative change often, far more often than not, happens because or reactively to something, and it's terrible that it takes that to do so. But change happening is a positive thing from a very, very dark cloud, and I think it's being spoken about more, and it makes life feel a lot more scary, but it's not. I don't think anything has changed. I don't think life is scarier. I think that people are speaking about it more, and that's only going to be a positive thing in terms of changing society and community.
It's no longer a knowledge problem; it's an accountability problem.
Is there a case or a story or whatever word you want to use for that you haven't been personally involved with and worked with, maybe kind of from Australian history or anything like that really, really stands out to you as something that maybe changed the way people look at things or has just really stuck out and stood out to you in any way?
Yeah, I think so Maurice Van Ryn, who's the Bega Cheese CEO, I've been lucky enough to meet one of his victim survivors who he's come public and he's waived his right to anonymity. His name is Eden Van Haren, and he's done a lot of media. He found out about me about the law change I started because Van Ryn, who was the CEO of Bega Cheese, probably the biggest cheese company in Australia, when he was arrested and went to jail, got rid of all his assets. He's worth millions of dollars, and Eden reached out to me because he said, I've sued this guy. I've been awarded $1.4 million, but because of this loophole that's been in place for years, I can't get anything. And the inspirational thing about him is that he's put his name and face out there and saying, hey, I'm the reason why this thing needs to change. Now, I can't afford medical treatment. I can't afford all the things that I've recommended. I'm not going to be able to work my full capacity. I haven't been able to finish my education to full capacity. And actually seeing a real life impact of how these things are going to help people. Like at the start, I've just thought, I'm going to sink the boost into this guy. But when I'm getting people contacting me and saying, this guy did this to me, you're my hope of finally being able to get to the point where I don't have to choose between food and medication for the week. My uncle's got $5 million in super. He sold a business. He owns multiple houses. If this passes, I finally get a chance to live. And a lot of these people that come forward and, say for instance, the Mast brothers in Adelaide, who two brothers were abused by a guy for many, many years. And when they didn't want to waive their right to anonymity, so they actually wore masks out the front of court, and they got a monsters walk with this guy every time he walked to court. And the most inspirational thing they said was, this guy gets out in a few years, but our suffering, we don't get to release our suffering in 18 months. There's no good behaviour bond for us. There's no early release for good behaviour. There's no suspended sentence. This is for life. And you look at COVID, every single one of us did a suspended sentence through COVID. You stay at home, you leave to get medication, doctor, groceries, and that's it. Where guys like this being sentenced to suspended sentence of home detention, what's the punishment? If you see you can get away with this, what's the punishment? When people like this start coming forward, Madeline West, she came forward and said, hey, this happens to me. Kate Miller-Heidke, even, is it Terry Crews from White Chicks?
Yeah.
He came out and said it happened to him as a child. And when more people are coming out and saying, hey, this happened to me, I came on the other end, it's giving a lot of people the courage because, 30 years ago, no one had an idol that's come out and said this happened to him. Hell, 5 years ago, they didn't have an idol that said it happened to him. So when people like that are saying this law change is going to help me, or increased sentencing will help me get around this, there's so many things that I'm trying, but I can't do my work if it wasn't for the inspirational people that come forward. And I'm effectively the voice of the voiceless. And I've never done this law change to puff my profile. If 5.5 years ago I was a footnote in a parliamentary document that said Andrew Carpenter brought this to us, we want to pass it, I'd have been great. But 5.5 years later, I don't know why I'm still trying to fight for something that's so obviously simple. And one government official said to me, this is a complicated thing we have to change. I said, dude, it's 6 words in the Bankruptcy Act, except for child sexual abuse offences. And I mean, look at COVID, for instance. It took 10 days for the federal government to implement laws for the early release of superannuation, so it wasn't a drain on the economy or the social services. So there's a rhyme and reason it's not happening, but to me I don't think it's a vote getter for politicians, because the only people that will vote against this will be child sex offenders. And by them coming out and say, we'll do this, it's not going to be like, oh, great. It's like, oh, should have been done years ago.
Is it that's kind of that, when we don't talk about it because, politicians aren't talking about super and bankruptcy for sexual predators because it's not a nice thing to talk about. It's not, a nice thing to have on the 6 p.m. news while we're eating dinner and be talking about that. Do you think that's part of it? It's just a thing that we, even in this day and age when we're much more open and we talk about things more, that's not a nice thing to talk about, so we just don't?
It's an uncomfortable topic, but it's one that needs to be discussed, and it's one that people really need to think that our most natural, precious resource we have in this country are our youth. They're going to be ones bringing this into the next level. And if 1 in 3 girls and 1 in 5 boys are being sexually abused, well, are we really using the natural resource to the best of our ability? Even if I can, all my advocacy, even if I save one life, it's worth it. I would love in 10 years' time to be like, hey, well, now it's 1 in 10 girls and 1 in 20 boys. It'll be worth it. But I feel like I'm constantly banging my head to the wall. But, the only reason I started my Instagram page is going, right, well, I might just start actually using my platform for a message and get people talking about it.
Can you tell us a positive story about, whether it's someone you've worked with or a story that you've heard through your work, that it's so easy to talk about the negative because that's what the whole thing is, but I'm sure you would have lots of positive stories and hopeful endings.
I had a girl that after years of being abused by her dad, she finally got the courage when she was about 40 to confront him, and she did it. He admitted it, went to the police, he admitted again over the phone, and he got arrested. The day before he went to prison, he transferred his house to his son for $20,000. So right away, I got that set aside, and so had a freehold house up for grabs that she'd go after. Went through trial, so liability was admitted. Had a trial and damages only, and he wanted to be heard on it. And his main thing was hearing about all the horrendous stuff he did to his daughter. He's like, "Oh yeah, I want to ask something to the judge." Okay, what do you want? What's going to happen to my new couch and TV? So the day the sheriffs called me and said they're going to come clean the house out to give all the net proceeds to this girl, they're like, "Oh, there's this really nice couch and TV here. What should I do with them?" "I'll just chuck it in the bin." And so he's getting out of jail in a few years. He's not going to have a house, and the house that he worked his entire life to pay off for, I managed to get every single cent of that to go to his victim survivor. I've had people that have come to me that they've lost, or the family have never believed what they've said, and yet we've sued them, we've won, and then multiple people have come forward and found out about this. And I think the biggest thing for me is when people get a lump sum of money. Money's not going to change anything. When someone says to me, "I can eat this week," I can
afford my medical bills, like you said before.
I can buy my son a car. I can go to Melbourne and visit my cousin. We think people that are working, a trip to Melbourne is a nice luxury. It's hard to think that there's so many people that have never been able to do anything in their life because they've basically been carrying a 1,000-kilo backpack of trauma their whole life. And just visibly seeing people not get the compensation, but normally when it's against the school, getting a letter of apology from the school, that's the thing that means more to anyone. It's, we are sorry this happened to you. We believe you. And to be able to be a part of someone's world, or I think the coolest thing to me is most of the time people come to see me, I'm the first ever person they've ever told about this.
Wow.
And right off the bat, I'm just like, I got you.
That's what you do it for. Yeah, wow. Oh my goodness. I don't even really know how to kind of wrap up or sum up. It's so, thank you for sharing all of this with us and our listeners. This is so different to any of the other chats we've had with anyone before. I think it's really, really interesting and really important as well to look at the civil side of things as well as criminal too. And I think it's very inspiring and hopefully, uplifting to be able to hear that when stats can be bad or look negative for, criminal reasons, there are other avenues. There are people out there who are getting justice in their own ways, and
Legally, of course.
legally, yes, legally, yeah. Vigilantes, we do not stand for, but. Thank you for showing us and talking to us about another side of the law that we haven't really delved into on this
Well,
podcast.
it's just to show that, you know, if police can't investigate something, there's always ways.
Yep.
You know, there's always ways to get justice. And
If people want to learn more about you and what you do, and also hear more about this and find a way to actually communicate and talk about something that they might have experienced or know that someone they love has been through, how do people follow you and find out more about
I'm just
you?
Andrew Carpenter Solicitor on Instagram and Facebook. But if you want to learn more, there's so many helpful websites out there. There's Samson, which is the sexual abuse hotline. There's my big thing is to everyone is talk to people. I always use example, the TV show Embarrassing Bodies. You know, we watch it as people.
Yeah.
But when is the first time you've ever seen, you know, Dr. Dan see something go, ugh? It's not that. When I always say people that have been abused as a child, it's like walking around with a finger that's constantly bleeding. You're just dropping blood and you never treat it. If you talk to people, it's not your fault. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Talk to people. There's psychologists, GPs, psychiatrists, counselors, hotlines, everything out there. You know, it's not your fault, so you shouldn't be forced to keep the burden. So, you know, take the backpack of trauma off and speak about it. But you know, my page is, I've had people offer to donate money. I said, look, I don't need money. I just need people sharing my stuff, because when you talk about this, that's the only way that change happens.